And this talk is about Samantabadhra, the bodhisattva of loving activity. He is the main protagonist of the Avatamsaka Sutra, a bodhisattva of practice, protector of the sutra, as well as those who are devoted to the practice. He is a source of vows. It is good to remember that bodhisattvas are the expression of qualities and real through fostering these qualities within us. Samantabadhra is featured in the final chapter of the Lotus Sutra and Book 3 and 36 of the Avatamsaka. He is hidden within our morning chant, the harmony of difference and sameness, and the ocean mudra samadhi, a Dogen fascicle dedicated to the teachings of the Avatamsaka. The whole of the cosmos complete, hidden within each breast. Through our practice, we acknowledge and touch the ultimate. There is the depth of shadow, moon, silence, and death, light as the inner spark and potent, an interior space where goodness is a difficult elixir, opening through the undifferentiated, how I learn to appreciate the solidity and clarity of my everyday. And the song flower, dedicated to the fact that I believe that every person has a song in their heart. And my work has lots of flowers and these big gardens, imaginative gardens, and my poems also. The song flower. Imagination is the inner shaping of the invisible power. Imagination like a flower, a strange flower, an enemy-like or peony-like, a puppy dressed in myriad red petals, as the not yet dawn appears in silence. Her field extends beyond the limit of my nature. Her blackened center like an eye that sees things through. Right here, right now, this intimate world of mine, always happening, like space held close and warm in the palm of your hands. Hidden are the myriad flowers abiding in the nooks and crannies of rocks and my garden. The flower is a vessel innately attuned to seed, warmth, soil, and moisture. Light and fragile, each morning a rite of passage. Today, wearing a top knot of lavender, she is thorny, a thistle, a laughing creature, and I imagine this laughter echoing like fine music. Echo, 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 I hear in the distance her delicate whisper, her fingers softly kneading flowers, embracing this body of the great embrace, untouched by vagaries of the world, a land of a dream forgotten, an earthly paradise, a still point through which the whole earth moves, dropping below the beginnings and ends. A litany of prayer, the practices of Samantabadhra, universal good. Imagination is the informing eye, the original seed. The two folds, the two faces, are becoming and letting be, likened to the Buddhas who emerge into the world because sentient beings suffer in ignorance, to easily think of themselves in terms of right or wrong, conceive of self and possessions, cling to the body, tend toward delusion and or confusion, discriminate relying on the basis of false views, keep themselves in bondage, following the flow of birth and death away from the path of enlightenment. And the life of all beings is embedded in the birth and death of each new being. Metaphor and symbol express our deeply rooted memory. Images form the language of the mystery. Our words are resonant and deep imprints of the silent witness. Imagination, the inner spark, fire and our feeling. Imagination like water, the great solvent. The vessel containing her shadow tincture, where I become sparkling and clear. Samantabadhra, the universal good, said to the great congregation, I do not see anything that is a bigger mistake than directing unreflective emotion thought towards other enlightening beings. And he especially notes anger. Why? Directing unreflective emotion thought towards other enlightening beings, especially anger, can create endless obstacles. The obstacle of not seeing enlightenment, the obstacle of not hearing the true teaching, the obstacle of being born in an impure world, the obstacle of being born in miserable states, the obstacle of sickliness, the obstacle of being the object of much slander, the obstacle of not seeing good companions, the obstacle of loss of right mindfulness and recollection, the obstacle of being born into a family of evil people, among evil spirits, goats, goblins, hobgoblins, demons, titans, vipers, and so on. And actually, in the Avatamsaka, this goes on much longer. I have shortened it for you, just to give you the flavor. So the main protagonist of the Avatamsaka Sutra is Samantabadhra. He is the bodhisattva of loving activity, and he transmits the 10 vows: venerating, praising, making offerings to the Buddha, confessing past misdeeds, rejoicing in the happiness of others, encouraging the study of the Dharma, encouraging enlightening beings to remain in the world and teach, encouraging enlightening beings to work for the benefit of all sentient and non-sentient beings, and to transfer merit. His animal is the white elephant, an emblem of royalty, strength, and care, and the elephant as maternal, at times appearing the elephant with 6 tusks to represent the 6 paramitas. Samantabadhra is the personification of the web of interconnectedness. He is the bodhisattva of the Sandokai, and that's harmony of difference and sameness, and his meditation and daily practice within the world is hidden in the ocean seal samadhi. His presence in the temple can be indirect, as the statue of the elephant stands alone at the gateway, as guardian of the teaching and community. Personally, in my study and as a person of the world, in my life and experience, I have considered Samantabadhra as my challenge, my wounded bodhisattva, to meet the world, to bridge into the world as voice, like a vital pulse, planting seeds with a renewed, varied, and colorful language. In the Lotus Sutra, the final chapter, encouragements of the Bodhisattva universal worthy, Samantabhadra functions as protector of beings who recite, study, and actualize the Lotus Sutra. He protects the sutra itself. Again, my question, my desire to carry this question across the millennia of my talks. How does the experience of the empty nature of the self, the empty nature of all dharmas, bring us back into the world? How does this foster seeds of compassion? And why do this? The Huayan tells us something important regarding our difference, the unique quality of an individual life, its time and place, family, ancestry, dreams, friends, enemies, associations, values, inborn proclivities and tendencies, our gifts and limits. How these come together within us is essential, unique yet not single or static, prone to the many inner and outer varied visitations. Our relationship to a collective is multiple and interrelated. This person as I am, yet empty of a separate self-nature. It is in the living, in the journey itself, moving forward, our vulnerability, our tendency to fall back, finding significance, finding voice, that our place of true belonging is discovered and expressed. What we do, and how we respond matters. It's my life, it's your life, and our work, and that is the issue. A truth that there are things to do and that it matters. And in the Huayan, when everything comes together and conditions are in place. It is says that each phenomena, and that is each of you, but it also would be the beams and the lights and the candles. Each of these is not only conditioned, but a total cause, having total power for the experience that all of us are having in this moment, in this room. So that says something that everything matters, and that each of us matters. How we live our lives matters. The metaphor of a seed can be far-reaching, in itself a container and potential. A seed is particular, rooted in its own way of opening and blossoming. What kind of flower, vegetable, or mood will this seed produce? Ecology as the intimation of large underlying relationships points us toward our natural rhythm. In its groundlessness is a root, our capacity to rest in wide open spaces. A great deal of spiritual practice is directed toward developing enough strength to hold the immensity and contribute to it, the influence and being influenced, and the many ways that sentient and non-sentient beings are influenced can be likened to this great conversation between our differences. Samantabadhra is often referred to as a hidden bodhisattva, his practice hidden in the marketplace, a secret inner hierarchy of values, inner relationships that express a natural rhythm. There is no formula, as in each new situation, learning to wait, learning to stay, to step back into the all too familiar karmic circumstance, into its potential for grasping or delusion, discovering a perspective large enough that our entanglement in smaller considerations, the dilemma of the yes and or the no, don't matter in quite the same way we thought they would, embraced by a greater value, to embody this larger embrace, able to be touched by, to care for ourselves and others in myriad invisible ways, not being in the way, not being in our own way, fresh, newly born, in touch with a flexible stability and clarity. And I have here the story of the Buddha, and we all know the story of the Buddha, and I have to say one of my pleasures in this temple is that every year in Rohatsu, our abbot Ejo, brings again the story of the Buddha and shows us a very different relevance each year. I have not always liked the story of the Buddha, but now that has changed, or I didn't always relate to it as much as I have now since being here. So this is again in the story of the Buddha. And part of the reason is because this ocean mudra samadhi was supposedly the samadhi that the Buddha entered into under the Bodhi tree, and he taught the Huayan and the Avatamsaka while he was in that samadhi. So that is the reason that the story of the Buddha is pertinent here. So the Buddha was born in Kapilavastu near the border of Nepal and India. He was a prince who lived in the palace of the king of the Sakya clan, was a member of the warrior caste. Siddhartha was his given name, which means he who achieves his goal. At birth, it was divined that he would either become a great king or renunciate. His father, the king Suddhodana, wishing to dissuade his son from the life of a mendicant, kept him isolated from the harshness of the world, showering him with every pleasure. When the Buddha spoke to his monks about his childhood, he said, "In some ways I was protected from the world. They laid out 3 lotus ponds for me. In my father's house, blue lotuses in one, red in another, white in the third. I wouldn't use any sandalwood that did not come from Varanasi. My tunic, my robe, my cloak were made of Varanasi cloths. Night and day I was protected by a white parasol to keep me from the cold and heat, and dust and weeds and dew." At age 29, Siddhartha, during 4 rare excursions from the palace, encountered the 4 sights: illness, old age, death, and a begging mendicant. Not long after, he left the palace one night to join a community of Indian ascetics. He became a part of the Indian renunciate path, the sannyasins, the renouncers, for 6 years. Having parceled out their days in obligations and precepts, they now had no habits at all. Having provided the wherewithal for huge families, they now kept no provisions. Having sought to attain herds, children, and long life, they now made no plans. For years they built themselves up through activity. Now they sought immobility. And Siddhartha studied diligently with various yoga masters, but remained dissatisfied. Somehow the extreme nature of these ascetic practices failed to absolve karma or to bring joy. One day Siddhartha left to wander the forests and fields alone. Do I want to heal and be happy? Am I afraid to say yes? He asked himself. Both his youthful life of indulgence and his early adult life of deprivation were movements away from who he was. This one vehicle, where the movement away is critical to the journey, providing a powerful impetus. The step back is crucial to feel and see with prajna intuition, the freshness, balance, and an uncanny sense of right view. And one night Siddhartha sat beneath the burdock tree, determined not to get up until he was awake. Holding the tension of both these extremes, he stood firm, yet not in opposition to Mara's attacks. And Siddhartha said, Mara, you false house builder, but I shall not build any more houses at your altar. At peace in meditative absorption, at dawn he awoke to the morning star, and Siddhartha found his voice. And I just want to say that we forget about this because we think of the Buddhist tradition as established, and we don't realize that he found his own voice, his own way of expressing his life and the Dharma at maybe 35 or so, and how important this is. He was in a way, seeped in the traditions of India and, and informed by, really centuries of spiritual tradition. So it didn't come from nowhere. And yet one day, he says these things that are really his to say. So it's something to think about and remember, when we are merely following the tradition, that this finding of voice is also important. In the middle way, the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Noble Path. So Siddhartha found his voice in the middle way, the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Noble Path. In this sense, what I find to be a flexible stability and rightness, an opening beyond the opposites, not being enmeshed in the prison of causality. So not being caught up in this side or that side, being able to grow large enough or big enough a view to be able to hold both sides. Siddhartha grew up and practiced in India, a country steeped in Hindu and Jain tradition, with a foundation of centuries full of rich and powerful philosophy, as well as spiritual practices. His father was a wealthy Hindu king. Samsara, the endless cycle of existence, karma, activity, and fate, and moksha, release, affected the social structure, ritual, and daily life of the people. So anatta is one of the three marks of foundation teaching in Buddhism, the teaching of no self, which goes counter to the Hindu principle of Brahma and Atman. It is about standing firmly on your own 2 feet, stepping forward with insight, moment by moment, being with your life as it is. And Robert Johnson, a post-Jungian analyst who spent months of every year for close to 50 years living in India, said the people there were happy who had no reason to be happy, a good example of living within the larger embrace. In the ocean mudra samadhi, a still point through which the whole earth moves, each life extending infinitely, we experience this infinite as always coming back, always coming back to this time and place, this life, our life as it is. In the story of the Buddha as Siddhartha is all of India, and yet he is wholly himself, all one, not caught up in his small self at rest. So in being as we are, what might that be? To set up one's mind without fixing it anywhere means to be a perfect master of oneself. And I remember a time early in my practice noticing that no matter how enmeshed I was in my circumstance and conditioning, there was a place deep in the belly that was still and calm. At times my mind would clear, become like a cool breeze, the belly a place where a troubled heart could settle, which I intuitively refer to as the ocean. I have drawings and paintings completed during a turbulent period of early practice. Ironically, how peaceful these images were, figures soaked with a subtle presence of inner light. The Avatamsaka Sutra speaks from the world of the absolute. Bodhisattvas course through a fantastic other, and yet it is just this reality realm, the Sambhogakaya. The absolute is not beyond this world, yet it does suggest a change, a transmutation of how we are with the world, a going beyond the habitual perception we have of ourselves and of our world, not taking up residence in an attitude of despair, to see within a negative judgment an invitation for work that needs to be done, to cultivate the freedom to move us forward and try a different way. This is not only an issue of mind and matter, but a presence of the intermediate realm, a process with its own laws, poised between body and mind. And we forget to do justice to the work of the psyche, her capacity to reflect and effect transformation. The dark angel, the masked dancer, in the realm of the dead, of the watery body of the dream, of the moon and of night, of mountains and trees, of our care for each other. This ocean as a feminine expression of interpenetration and compassion, the influx of imaginative potential into and of the everyday, the great round emptiness of the Huayan, the Dharmadhatu. And I would like to point out again that the Sandokai, harmony of difference and sameness, and the precious Mira Samadhi, which we chant each morning here at Eugene Buddha Eye Zen Center, were heavily influenced by the Avatamsaka and the Huayan school. And it is round because whichever way you go and whatever you meet, there is always something you can do. You are never apart from Buddha. And this is very real, it is not just, that's nice. It really is so. From Dogen, Ocean Mudra Samadhi, Buddhas and ancestors continuously maintain Ocean Mudra Samadhi. While swimming in this samadhi, they expound, realize, and practice. Traveling through water includes journeying along the ocean bottom, and this is called coursing along the bottom of the deepest ocean. And this ocean differs from the sea of birth and death, where Buddhas vow to guide beings drifting in the birth and death to the shore of liberation. Each Buddha ancestor breaks through the bamboo node and that's tendencies toward the discriminative mind, and passes the barrier individually. And this is done only through the power of Ocean Mudra Samadhi, a subjective that is objective, a world alive with energy and beings, a whole life dropping down as the ocean, to hold both the relative and the absolute truth. In the Dogen fascicle, a bodhisattva walks with his feet at the bottom of the ocean and his head above the ocean. And the Buddha states that although a self is present, it is not separate from the ocean. So we enter the practice through the relative dimension, and you can't just latch on to the transcendent. You have to go in and through your particular suffering in order to learn. And through acknowledging our suffering, gaining insight into our suffering, insight into the cessation of suffering, through practice with the Eightfold Noble Path. 3 years into my own practice, I went through a very rough period. Despite appearances, relationship with my karma was transfigured, enabling me to hold this habit energy in a new way, not being compelled to make destructive choices. And the change expressed in Buddhist sutras from the pratimoksha vow, and those are the precepts in the Theravadan tradition, the vow of the Theravadins to the bodhisattva vow of the Mahayana is a natural progression. And, it's a little bit more fuzzy, being in the world and being a bodhisattva, than, living in a monastery and just following precepts. So supposedly, more difficult. Until we experience this shift, learning to transform our suffering, the absolute dimension expressed in the Heart Sutra, no suffering, no insight into suffering, no cessation of suffering, no eightfold path makes no sense. So we never lose touch with precepts. They are integrated and function through us as a recognition of our deepening awareness. And I'm not a very much a rule and regulation person, but even if you are, the precepts, just become a natural part of you, just a deepening sense of your being in the world and being with people, and a greater sense of that than without them. Therefore, O great enlightening beings, if you want to fulfill the practices of great enlightening beings, diligently practice the 10 principles, devoted not to abandon sentient beings, to see enlightening beings as Buddhas committed to the practice of the Buddha. Therefore, O great enlightening beings, living by the 10 principles, able to embody the 10 kinds of purity, whole each moment yet gradual, thorough and profound, is the penetration into the realm of reality, to cultivate and maintain the roots of goodness. When bodhisattvas persist in the 10 kinds of purity, they're imbued with 10 kinds of broad knowledge, comprehension of individual and corresponding suffering in the world, transfigured through meditation, chanting, study, and skillful action. Once enlightening beings are established in this knowledge, they realize 10 kinds of universal entry. All worlds enter one point enters all worlds. And this is again how we hold the whole cosmos in our own being. This is this relationship between the part and the whole. And it really is, cause and effect as simultaneous, and giving, receiving as one. In the moment that I am giving, I am already receiving that giving back towards me. So, O great enlightening beings who have contemplated in this way, now abide in the sublime mind, immersed within the great ocean, rest firm with equal unbiased mind. Enlightening beings abide in these 10 kinds of sublime mind, realize the Buddhist teaching of identity and intercausality, to realize the Buddhist teaching of the differentiated, to realize the Buddhist teaching of the undifferentiated, to realize the Buddhist teaching by one means, to realize the Buddhist teachings in untold means, to realize the Buddhist teaching of equality. To realize the Avatamsaka Flower Ornament Sutra is to be present and as we are, to practice undivided and always coming home. The seed is a gift of vision. My house with its myriad altars, the ancestors and the hearth fire burning, the darkness is no longer a barrier for crossing over. The turning about, the moon outside, a sliver of cool white fire, an edge through which the midnight sky imperceptibly enters, the gate of the new moon yesterday, a slowly waning crescent, now you are nowhere. Yet you are likened to the seed who quietly waits for water, warmth, and nourishment to penetrate. You are falling back through the dream, undefended in the phase of depth and wandering, unhurried in the phase of light and becoming. as when the world is slowly recognized as round, becoming rounder, like the round of the old and the new moon dissolving and reforming, her excess disappearing. Her mind is made of softened boundaries, likened to a frog and the butterfly, the seed and the serpent and the new moon, who experience a metamorphosis by shedding their old and worn-out skin, emerge bright in the dropping down, in the shattering to the dark and hidden places. That's my talk for today. Thank you. So we have some time for questions. Questions.
Shin-ei-san.
Oh, hi.
Hi.
Yeah.
I really appreciate just the way that you're praising imagination as like this vital part of practice. And I think for me, that the danger of, creating false narratives and believing them versus that healthy kind of creation is something I'm really curious about right now. And at least the way that I understand it, in my internal world, imagination can be great, but as soon as I'm using imagination as an external assessment, then it gets a little bit dangerous or unfair. So I'm just curious for you, like, what are those two, where is imagination maybe falling into those narratives that may be unfair versus a healthy tool that's sort of like aligning or growing your practice?
I think that there's habit energy, and there's really and truthfully, it could be called a negative imagination, if you want to, and there's nothing that human beings do that don't have another side. So thinking is a wonderful thing, but we all know that thinking can take us down roads that are just bizarre. And emotion is a wonderful thing. We can love and connect, but we all know about the clashes and, having emotions that are unhealthy and destructive. But I would say that habit energy is probably the most unimaginative thing that we do and that we have. If you take a close look at, I don't know if you keep a diary. And I, have all these things about, I don't keep a diary, but I put down, when these things come up so that I can keep track of them. And, there's nothing more repetitive, than this habit energy. So in a way, isn't imaginative, it isn't open at all. So, I'm thinking of all of the times that I latched on to, things in the world and bought into them and wasn't open enough to use my imagination and trust my imagination. So I make a clear difference, I guess because I'm an artist, about, a willingness to look differently, a willingness to see things differently, a willingness to let go, of a habitual mechanical way of looking and thinking that we all fall into, as what is a positive imagination, and this, latching on to, some thought that I'm spinning round and round and round, over and over again, as very negative and really not imaginative. It's really being stuck, in something. I mean, if you look closely at it. So, it's just, not being, I guess the imagination is something that flows and is open and what I call, a helpful illusion, a way that makes me feel grounded. So I really have learned to know the difference, between ideas that I come up with that, you got to be kidding, and ideas that where I am really grounded. Also, the practice has helped me to look at dreams, in a way that is, more aligned, and more where I'm more receptive, and I'm not just superimposing my usual idea on the dream. I wake up from a dream, and I know this dream, and I knew it, and, spinning around and then stop, and giving the dream time to open and enter and tell me something of what it's trying to say, rather than my kind of superimposing something, this habit energy that I already know that I'm looking for and waiting for. So, that's the only way I can say. You just have to keep weighing, you know what I mean? But I really, because things are not, things are always changing, then, the world really has to be kind of an imaginative place, and even though we are conditioned, and because we're conditioned, we can't just do anything. So that's important to know. So I would say the practice, and the practice helps you recognize where you're veering off in a wrong place. I mean, and to, know it and, come back to, I think, a deeper and truer imagination, which is open and flowing and moving with things and accepting. So, and that's the best that I think right now. Does that help?
Yeah, no, I appreciate it.
Okay. Anyway.
Shin-ei,
Yes.
could you elaborate a little bit on the ideas of the Hindu ideas of Atman, the Christian ideas of soul, of having a soul, and what Buddha realized underneath the Bodhi tree, as you were saying, anatta.
Yeah. Well, anatta just means no self or no soul. So
Right.
it isn't an eternal solid self moving underneath all things. It just is change. But Atman, and I don't know a whole lot about, the whole of Indian tradition, but I know that was reverse. It was the idea of something that flowed on underneath all things. And that was, kind of a basis of change, instead of the Buddhist idea that there is just change and there is no separate, solid, individual self, this idea of eternalism that flows underneath all being. So, that is the difference. I really love the Vedas when I used to read them, and there probably was a reality to that too. I think, it's just coming into a very different time, that the Buddha's words suddenly are more sensible and make more sense for us, in being open continually to change. And maybe before that time, we weren't ready, and that it wasn't essential to the culture, to see and think in that way. That the Buddha just, was maybe a forerunner of a very different time. I'm not Christian, so, but I would say, the soul that I like is more a Jungian soul. That's an imaginative soul, a soul that, contains all things and is also immutable and changing. And the Christian soul, I think, is, again, this idea of, this solid me that, endlessly, century after century is, up in heaven or still here, which, the Buddha, according to the Buddha, this is not so. And I have seen this in my own life, that this solid self is not so. So I tend toward the Buddha's understanding of interpenetration and the many beings. I mean, does that,
Shin-ei, can you speak a little bit to the English translation of the title of the Avatamsaka, the Flower Ornament Sutra? You offered some beautiful poetry in the beginning about the ripeness of the imagery of flowers.
I think the actual meaning of it is, the purity of perfuming or something of that nature. But it really is, I guess I take it as the imagination of flowers and the spaciousness and a dreamlike quality of the Sambhogakaya realm. And the Avatamsaka is a realm actually when people are actually advanced enough in practice, I mean, that we can create together a world that is not based in samsara and in the sorrows and anxieties, that many of us have experienced. So it is kind of an imaginative realm, but then in other ways, it also is very real and pertinent to our lives today. But it is about a society or an enlightened world that's created when we are, when we are more whole and expressive. We have seen through a lot of our obscurations. So I would say that that would be the best way, to describe it, So, it is a land of flowers. It is a land of peace and presence and spaciousness and enjoyment, a place that you can find in yourself when you set aside, a lot of stresses and pressures, and you're just willing to be here and to be with other people. So it is an actual place that you can be. So, is that, anyone else?
In studying this sutra, is there a particular, I would say, medicine that has opened up for you?
Yeah, I was thinking about that. Yes, just in really being more and more able to let go of particular ideas about myself that were limiting. And I have a really good practice, but I felt that I needed a broader understanding. This opening into this ultimate of being more and more okay and able to meet circumstances, difficult circumstances, with grace is the best way that I can describe it. And seeing more and more that a lot of the things that for us seem real and, threatening and daunting are actually just a part of the flow. And we can embrace, life and death, illness, loss, sickness, all of these things in creative, imaginative, and positive ways. And this I am inwardly experiencing. Without going into, I want to save that for the Mondo, when I'm going to tell you why this was so difficult, you know what I mean? And the particular things, that make me worry and scared, so I don't want to say that now. But anyway, it's just that, this bigger embrace that I started out calling it the greater fabric of justice, and and then learning something about its quality as the ultimate, and understanding how to continually let go of of things that come about or that I mean in the world, and to express or maintain or express my meeting with these things with a grace or with care, or with being grounded and as solid as I can be. So, and I don't know if that's a good example. These are all very hard things to pinpoint. So anyway.
Well, that's very inspiring.
Oh, yeah, anyway. Okay. So I think we are okay and done. Any urgent things? No? Okay.